I need to stop reading World War II history books. I do this, every dude does this. I don't know why we do this. I love them. But what hits me, what floors me, is the unwavering patriotism of that generation of young men and how committed they were to fighting for this country that they loved and how universal that was across this country. Story after story after story you read about young men crawling over broken glass to get into the military to fight for America, lying on their military entrance forms when they didn't think they could get in, lying about their age. Their parents wouldn't sign them up. They're forging things on documents. Multiple, I don't mean one, multiple stories of young men committing suicide during World War II because they weren't allowed to join the military. Imagine that level of patriotism across the country, where if you can't go fight and maybe die for your country, you kill yourself. Now, the reason I need to stop reading this stuff is I juxtapose that with what's currently happening in this country and specifically with the military. And what it does to me is it just brings it home. It makes everything so crystal clear exactly how far we've fallen and exactly where we are. Because this generation of patriotic young men, our most patriotic young men, they're not crawling over broken glass to join the military. They're crawling over broken glass to avoid it. They don't want to be part of the military. Look, you don't have to take my word for it. The recruiting numbers speak for themselves. Young men do not want to be part of this military right now. And why would they? Look, let's talk about the new chairman of the Joint Chiefs. Why would they? Tommy Tuberville's been making all kinds of news. Republican Senator Tommy Tuberville for blocking, well, what they've been saying is he's been doing, they're lying, is he's blocking generals and admirals from getting promotions. That's not what he's doing. What he's doing is he's blocking unanimous consent, it's called. What is that? He's blocking automatic promotions, essentially blanket promotions, where instead of this guy having to come before the Senate and get a yes or no vote, you're approved, you're not approved. Instead, they just want to bring you a whole basket of names and say, here are all the guys we want to promote. And normally all the senators say, yeah, sounds good, because senators are completely useless. Tommy Tuberville happens to be a senator who uses his power, praise God for him, because of the military funding abortions. Tommy Tuberville has stepped up and said, as long as the military does this, it's wrong, it's illegal, there's no more unanimous consent. He's been blocking it. Now, keep in mind, the only thing he even has the power to block is this unanimous consent thing, where they bring all the names in one big basket. Chuck Schumer has and has had the power to bring any individual name up for a vote in front of the Senate. You know this because he did so yesterday.
I have just filed cloture on the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the Commandant of the Marine Corps, and the Army Chief of Staff. These men should have already been confirmed. They should already be serving in their new positions. The Senate should not have to go through procedural hoops just to please one brazen and misguided senator. And the abortion policy that Senator Tuberville abhors will remain in place. Senator Tuberville will have accomplished nothing. But the harm he is doing to the military and their families remains, and unfortunately continues for hundreds of others.
Harm. The harm he's doing to the military and their families. Harm he's doing. Harm. Well, I've got news for you and really everybody. And this is difficult. This will be difficult to accept for people who are unfamiliar with things going on in the military, maybe people who didn't serve and kind of have this lofty view of all these generals and admirals. Most of those people suck, and most of those people should be nowhere near the military. And most of those people, their very presence in the military actually hampers the military. In fact, probably the best thing you could do for the military instead of promoting all those people would be to fire all of them. Would you lose one or two good eggs in there? Oh, of course. But for the most part, you'd be losing people like, I don't know, Charles Q. Brown, C.Q. Brown Jr., if you will. He is the new chairman of the Joint Chiefs. If you want to know why young men in the United States of America don't want to join the military anymore, take a look at the man who now runs it.
You can't let it just be happenstance that brings in the diversity, whether it be race, gender, ethnic background, sexual orientation, socioeconomic background. You really got to spend some time thinking about it, because you may miss an opportunity if you don't really spend some time looking at the slate of candidates and then asking some hard questions. And that's an aspect of me as the chief of staff. When I sit down with Secretary Brett, we just had a conversation about this yesterday as we're looking at some key positions. Who are the diverse candidates, and are we making sure we are grooming them so they have the opportunity?
Life and death. Young men and women dying, and dying in horrible ways. Those are the stakes of military accomplishment and failure. And the new chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff openly brags on videotape how he sits down to choose people for critical leadership positions, and he does so based on skin color. You see, that young man in Nebraska, he's on his high school football team. He's a junior this year. He loves World War II movies and documentaries, maybe even books like I do. His dad fought in Vietnam. He's always had a dream to put on the uniform, go see what he's made of, fight for his country. That young man, that junior in high school in Nebraska, that's the kind of young man who earns a Medal of Honor one day, charging up a hill to carry his buddies to safety. But you know what that young man is not going to do? He's not going to join to serve underneath somebody who talks about St. George Floyd this way.
As the commander of Pacific Air Forces, a senior leader in our Air Force, and an African American, many of you may be wondering what I'm thinking about the current events surrounding the tragic death of George Floyd. Here's what I'm thinking about. I'm thinking about how full I am with emotion, not just for George Floyd, but the many African Americans that have suffered the same fate as George Floyd. I can't fix centuries of racism in our country, nor can I fix decades of discrimination that may have impacted members of our Air Force. I'm thinking about how I can make improvements, personally, professionally, and institutionally, so that all airmen, both today and tomorrow, appreciate the value of diversity and can serve in an environment where they can reach their full potential. I want the wisdom and knowledge to lead, participate in, and listen to necessary conversations on racism, diversity, and inclusion.
That young man in Nebraska is just going to go do something else. And this is why you think we have a recruiting crisis, but it's actually so much worse. It's not just that we're not coming close to making our numbers for recruiting. The numbers we're bringing in, they aren't people you want in the military, because the ones you want in the military, they don't want to join and serve under that. Are great young men and women still joining to serve? Absolutely. And you should say a prayer for them every day because of the state of their leadership. But there aren't near enough of them. And you know what really cracks me up about all this is, boy, Republicans love to talk about woke these days, don't they? They love to complain about it. And you know what they really, really love? They love to complain about it in the military, because that's a very safe thing to do. Even most Democrats kind of don't want all this stuff in the military. So Republicans love to get up in front of the camera and say, military's too woke, and drag queen story hour, and this is ridiculous. But you see, that guy's the new chairman of the Joint Chiefs because the Senate had a vote. Would you like to know how many Republicans stood against the new chairman diversity hire? 11. 11 of them. All the names you know. Cruz, Hawley, Schmidt, Vance, Ron Johnson, etc. All the names you know. You see, all the other Republican senators who love to complain about woke this and woke that, and there's no place for this in the military, they all lined up to vote for more of it yesterday. And one more thing young men don't want to do. And again, your opinion on this, my opinion on this really doesn't really matter. This is the truth. That same young man in Nebraska, he doesn't dream of putting on the uniform to go die for Ukraine.
And as President Biden and Secretary Austin have said many, many times over, we, the United States, will continue to provide support to Ukraine for as long as it takes.
As long as it takes. We had Mike Pence going out there yesterday talking about young men and women having to go to Ukraine if this thing fails. Lindsey Graham, Tom Cotton talking about sending Ukraine more missiles. We need to ramp this thing up more and more and more and more. Young men, that young man in Nebraska, whatever you think about the Russia-Ukraine disaster, he doesn't want to go die over there.